Hey guys! Today we're going to watch a video from the Blog channel. The video is called Why Are We Dumb? And honestly, at first I didn't get who he even refers to. For example, the thumbnail says, 6 main mistakes of Zoomers. So maybe it's about Zoomers. So that's the entry. Because Zoomers are supposed to be smart and progressive, right? I wonder, are we the dumb ones, or are they? Let's watch.
Who can you really count on? Your parents? Your best friend? The condom that's been in your wallet since 2007? Well, not always. Yourself? Well, you wouldn't let yourself down, would you? Now imagine that your own brain is hurting you every single day. And that's the honest truth. And we're not even talking about psychiatric diagnoses right now. Completely healthy people deceive themselves every day. Because of this, we make dumb decisions, lose money, and lose faith in people. And we keep making mistakes over and over again.
A condom from 2007. Guys, if any of you still have one in your wallet, well, I wouldn't recommend using it. Although, I'm curious what actually happens to latex after so many years. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments, because I have no idea. It's definitely true that your brain can mess with you every single day. I've had days where everything's fine, it's a good day, and suddenly your inner critic wakes up inside you, and you start thinking, I'm doing the wrong way, I'm doing the wrong thing, I'm not who I should be at all. And of course, you just want to eat it all away or wash it down with something sweet. Is it just me, or do you guys feel the same way?
Part 1, where we talk about how the brain cuts corners. The 1970s. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman decided to find out whether people have an intuitive grasp of statistics. After all, even professional scientists and economists often make simple mistakes when estimating probabilities. Kahneman also noticed something interesting. The same experimental conditions led to repeated mistakes. Kahneman is very talented and very complicated. And honestly, it's easier to assemble an IKEA cabinet without instructions than to wrap your head around his experiment. So we simplified his idea so that even Boo could understand.
Kahneman, statistics, mistakes, I can already tell this is going to be really tough. But that line about it being easier to assemble an IKEA cabinet without instructions than to understand his experiment, that's exactly how I feel. I remember once I was putting together some shelf, and I screwed one part on the wrong way. Basically, it was crooked and ugly, but I lived with it for 2 years. That's fine, right? So if Kahneman is harder than that shelf, guys, we might as well just turn off this video and go on living our lives in peace. By the way, Boo dies. Who is Boo? Is that a character or something?
Let's imagine we've brought a test subject to the zoo. He stands in front of the cage with Boo's distant relative and asks him to guess how accurately the monkey can throw a banana into a bin. Can you picture that? So, here's what they found. If, on the way to the cage, the test subject saw the number 10, they estimated the monkey's chance of hitting the bin at around 25%. But if they saw the number 65, they guessed the probability was about 45%. In other words, the bigger the number they saw on the way, the higher the probability they gave. Yeah, our brains are just that easy to influence. Kahneman realized that behind our logical thinking are stable mental mechanisms.
So, what do we have here? A monkey, a banana, a bin, and a number. Honestly, it sounds more like the start of an absurd joke than a scientific experiment. Seriously, you just see a number and your brain is already like, yep, got it, that's the probability. I remember buying a toy I didn't need at all, just because there was a sign next to it that said 70% off. That's just how our brains work, right, guys?
That's how heuristics were discovered. Heuristics are mental shortcuts the brain uses to make quick decisions in uncertain situations. This was a huge help to our ancestors. You hear a branch snap in the bushes? Is it a predator? No time to think, run. Or here's an office example. When you get a new task, you start doing it the way you're used to. If it worked before, repeat it. But there's a side effect, cognitive bias. Those are the very brain errors that mess up your life. For example, when your usual way isn't actually the most efficient, but you still sit there transcribing a call recording by hand instead of just running the audio through an AI. Or when you underestimate how long a task will take, because your brain is just that optimistic.
Guys, here's a new word for you, heuristics. Honestly, I'm hearing this word for the first time myself. But if I understood this right, it's when your brain goes, I'll just solve this real quick. Who here has ever transcribed a voice message by hand? Raise your hand. Come on, we've got neural networks now. Guys, just upload the audio and you're done. But your brain's like, nah, that's nothing, it'll only take me 5 minutes. And then you're sitting there for an hour, still transcribing, getting annoyed, and your coffee's been cold for ages. Thanks, optimistic brain, but next time I think I'll manage just fine without you.
To figure out where these cognitive distortions come from, we need to understand what's going on in our heads. Part 2, in which evolution is once again to blame for everything. Human thinking is a complicated thing, so much so that evolution has actually set aside 2 separate systems for it. The first system works on autopilot, quickly and without conscious effort. Its domain is routine tasks and answers to simple questions. Its main weapon is those very heuristics. It was precisely System 1 that helped our distant ancestors react quickly to the sound of that twig snapping in the bushes. It's thanks to this system that we can ride a bike without really thinking about how we're doing it.
I have a lot of respect for evolution, but once again, it's to blame for everything. It turns out we have 2 systems in our heads. The first is autopilot. It does everything quickly, no effort required. You walk, you breathe, you ride your bike. But I think maybe it overheats sometimes, because I personally can walk to the store and at some point not even remember how I got there. Basically, we just exist, and the brain just does everything for us.
The second system is kind of like a manual control mode for the mind. The brain turns to it for solving complex problems, analysis, and reflection. On a global scale, the development of humanity is thanks to System 2. New tools, production optimization, the creation of new technologies, all of this requires deep analysis, which is the responsibility of System 2. To sum up, System 1 is about automatism and speed. System 2 is about awareness and logic. And here's the nuance. Your brain is always in energy-saving mode. So, 95 to 98% of the time, you're operating on System 1. And when it, with all its heuristics, tries to tackle System 2's tasks, that's when cognitive biases pop up.
Here comes the second system. The second system is when our brain takes full control and really starts to work. This, as I understand it, is analytical work, something related to technology, some serious tasks, and all that. So it turns out that everything that truly advances humanity, we do using just 5% of our capabilities. As I mentioned before, our brain seems to be on autopilot all the time. We're constantly saving energy, and the part of us that's supposed to handle complex things, for some reason, rarely switches on. And when it does, it's hard for us, we get lazy, and our brain gets tired. That's why we're getting dumber and dumber, folks.
Part 3, where we'll talk about the most common mistakes our brain makes. There are a ton of cognitive biases, seriously, a lot. We've picked out the top 5 most common ones. We run into them all the time, both in business and in everyday life. The first bias is the halo effect. That's when your overall impression of a person or brand automatically affects how you see all their other qualities. Does he have a nice suit? He must be a reliable business partner. In the 70s, scientists conducted an experiment at American universities. They analyzed how professors graded student essays. It turned out that the more attractive the student, the higher their final grade, even when the essays were completely identical.
Don't judge by appearances. You don't do that, right? The halo effect is when we look at a person and already decide what they're like just based on their appearance. I remember, back at university when I was studying linguistics, there was one professor who always gave me B's. Then I came to the exam all put together, with my hair done, wearing a dress, looking sharp and pretty, and for the first time she gave me an A, even though my answers were mediocre. That's when I realized, yep, it works. To be honest, I actually noticed this back in school too. When you start growing up, people begin to pay attention to you, and you see how they react to your appearance. And that's how you develop this feeling that sometimes just a smile is enough, and it's like you've already passed the test halfway.
The second cognitive bias is the framing effect. Because of it, people react differently to the same information. It all depends on the context in which it's presented. 50 years ago, Israeli psychologist Amos Tversky tipped off marketers that people are more likely to buy a product for 80 rubles if the price tag says it used to cost 100, but now there's a discount.
So, the framing effect is when we react differently to the same information just because it was presented in a different way. Be honest, who hasn't fallen for those yellow price tags in stores? You know, the ones that say, was 100, now 80. And that's it. You already feel like you've saved a lot. I already mentioned, right, that I recently went in to buy napkins and walked out with a mug because it was on sale. And if the price had just been written without any fuss, I would have just walked past that mug. So yeah, they catch us, very skillfully, too. It's not exactly a scam, but marketers just really know how our brains work.
The third bias is the sunk cost effect. Every beginner entrepreneur is familiar with it. Because of this bias, they keep investing money, time, and other resources into a product or negotiations, even when it's no longer worth it, simply because they've already put in so much. The fourth is confirmation bias. Because of this cognitive bias, we tend to seek out, remember, and interpret information in a way that proves we're right. And anything that suggests otherwise? Who even cares about that? For example, you think sports just aren't for you. Well, okay, you gave in to persuasion, went to the gym, and immediately pulled your back. Your brain screams, see, it's definitely not for you. But the fact that you spent the last 10 years sitting in a chair and then immediately went for the barbell, well, no, that's different. That doesn't count.
Yeah, sunk costs, that's totally about me. When you've already invested your time, money, and nerves, and it just feels too painful to quit. That's exactly what happened to me with those design courses, by the way. I already realized it wasn't for me somewhere around the middle, but I still kept watching, doing some of the homework, just because I'd already paid for it. Even though inside everything was already screaming, why are you wasting your time on this? Why are you even doing this? And then there's this confirmation bias thing, that's a really powerful force. You go and say, sports just aren't for me. You go to the gym, pull a muscle in your back. Your brain goes, see, I told you, sports just aren't your thing.
The fifth cognitive bias is the availability heuristic. Imagine you have an Aunt Tanya, and she's afraid of flying. The news is always talking about another plane crash. And so her System 1 concludes that flying is dangerous. At the same time, Aunt Tanya isn't afraid to drive cars. Even though fatal car accidents happen much more often.
Did you know that airplanes are actually the safest way to travel? And that's exactly why the crashes we hear about are so high profile, because they're so rare. If you look at the statistics for car accidents, it's a nightmare. Our brain goes, planes are scary, because I hear about them a lot. Just recently, a friend of mine told me that before every flight, he gets himself into a state that's, maximum drunkenness. And I know he's not the only one. I'm sure you've heard stories like that too. And you tell him, look at the statistics. Planes are safe. He replies, no, I saw it on TV, there was a report. That's how our brain works, not with facts, but with emotions. Thanks, brain, you're up to your usual tricks.
Part 4, where we'll fight cognitive biases. There really are a lot of traps. But the good news is that the ways to deal with them are pretty much the same. It's about increasing that very mindfulness. Mindfulness lets you activate System 2, so you can use it to check and correct the autopilot work of System 1. Most often, people recommend meditating. But what if meditation just isn't your thing? We get it. Here are a couple of mental tricks that can help your brain make fewer mistakes. First, use external feedback. And this isn't just about talking things over with friends. Share your thoughts with someone who's willing to give you honest feedback, who won't be afraid to risk your relationship and tell you that you messed up if you really did. We highly recommend finding people like that. The second trick is to write down your thought process. It takes quite a bit of effort, but it's effective. Record how you were thinking while making a decision, especially if it causes you some inner conflict. Third, treat your thoughts as if they don't belong to you. Yeah, it might sound a bit schizoid, but it's actually pretty easy to train yourself to evaluate your own thoughts as critically as if they were coming from an opponent in a debate. Fourth, slow down your decision-making. Often, quick decisions are made based on intuition. That means they're completely and totally relying on System 1. To fix this, you need to get used to giving yourself more time. Set a timer for 10 minutes, especially when it comes to something important. Thinking about making a big impulse purchase? Yes. Sure, that PlayStation looks amazing, but put off the decision until tomorrow. You might realize you don't even have time to play it. But one thing you shouldn't hesitate about is liking this video and subscribing.
By the way, I actually tried meditation once. I can't really say it's my thing. You know, like sitting in the lotus position and instantly reaching enlightenment, that never happened for me. But there is something special about the process. I remember one summer, I put on a meditation for 10 or 20 minutes, I don't remember exactly, lay down on the balcony floor, stared at the sky for a long time, and somehow things felt lighter. My thoughts let go a bit, there was some anxiety, but it went away. I guess meditation is like sports. At first it feels really strange, at first it's hard, unfamiliar, but if you don't burn out, it can become something important, some kind of meaningful ritual. By the way, about thoughts, writing your thoughts down really works, it definitely works. I had a little notebook, I called it the catcher of my thoughts. I kept it for over a month. I wrote down things there that I couldn't say out loud, then I lost my pen, and that's where my practice ended. But even now, I sometimes reread it. It's interesting. I think if I ever go to a psychologist, I'll definitely show it to them. About slowing down, that's honestly golden advice, I think, because if I really set a timer before shopping, I wouldn't have 4 identical summer tops right now. That's how the system works. Some impulse, an emotion, and suddenly the thing is yours. I feel like stores play special music, you know, kind of soothing and calming, so your brain switches off and you end up shopping more quickly in that relaxed atmosphere. It's interesting with loans too. The bigger the amount, the more time they give you to think it over. That would actually be great. So, the larger the loan amount, the more time you get to consider it. Very sensible. And yes, guys, don't forget to subscribe. If you watched all the way to the end, you're honestly awesome. I'm truly very grateful to you. I read your comments, remember what you write, and try to reply. Let me know which videos I should watch next and what topics you're interested in. I read everything, and sometimes I even Google things to better understand what you mean. Sometimes I use ChatGPT too, it helps me as well. So subscribe, hit the like button, support me, it really helps. I liked the video, it was interesting and overall useful. I wish you a great, warm evening, and may your brain make only the right decisions today. This was VIKKIE with you. Bye-bye.